The rain hammered against our dining room windows like an unwelcome guest demanding entry, which seemed fitting since half the people at my Thanksgiving table fell into that same category. I carved the turkey with mechanical precision, while my wife Nessa held court at the other end, her voice carrying that particular pitch that meant trouble was brewing. "Kellan's been so busy with his little computer projects lately," she announced to the assembled crowd, gesturing with her wine glass in a way that suggested this wasn't her first refill. "Sometimes I wonder if he even remembers he has a family." I kept carving, letting the comment slide off me like the gravy I was pretending to focus on. After 15 years of marriage, I'd developed thick skin when it came to Nessa's public performances. The audience tonight included her overbearing brother Lars, her gossipy best friend Samara, and most importantly, her formidable grandmother, Maren, a woman who could freeze hellfire with a single glance. "Dad works really hard," my 10-year-old daughter Avery piped up from beside me, loyalty radiating from her small frame. "He built me a whole computer from scratch last weekend." "That's nice, sweetheart," Nessa replied, with the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "But some of us have real jobs that require actual human interaction." Lars snorted with laughter, already 3 beers deep despite dinner barely starting. "Yeah, hiding behind a screen all day. Real manly stuff, brother-in-law." I set down the carving knife and looked up, meeting Maren's sharp blue eyes across the table. At 82, Nessa's grandmother commanded respect through sheer presence alone. She'd built a small fortune in real estate back when women weren't supposed to do such things, and her opinion carried weight in this family, sometimes the only weight that mattered. "Kellan," Maren said, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter like a blade through butter, "remind me what you do exactly. I'm afraid my memory isn't what it used to be." The table quieted. Even the rain seemed to pause, waiting for my response. "I'm a software engineer, Mrs. Hollis. I design security systems for banks and hospitals. Nothing too exciting, but it keeps the lights on." "Keeps the lights on," Samara repeated with a theatrical laugh. "That's one way to put it, though from what Nessa tells me, you could probably use some help in that department too." My hand stilled on the serving fork. "I'm sorry. What exactly has Nessa been telling you?" "Oh, you know." Samara waved her hand dismissively. "Just girl talk. How she's been having to pick up the slack lately, financially speaking." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Lars seemed to sense he'd wandered into dangerous territory. I looked at Nessa, who had suddenly become very interested in her mashed potatoes. "Financially speaking," I repeated slowly. "That's interesting, because last I checked, I was still making the mortgage payments, and the car payments, and paying off those student loans from your marketing degree that you're so proud of." "Kellan?" Nessa's voice carried a warning tone, but I was past caring about warnings. "No, really, I'm curious now. Samara, what exactly did my wife tell you about our financial situation?" Maren leaned forward slightly, her attention laser-focused on the unfolding drama. This was better than her afternoon soap operas. Samara shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I just meant, with her promotion and everything, she's been contributing more lately." "Her promotion?" I nodded thoughtfully. "The one that came with all those late nights at the office, and those weekend training sessions with that personal trainer. What's his name again, honey? Devin?" Nessa's fork clattered against her plate. "You're being ridiculous." "Am I? Because I'm starting to think there's a lot I don't know about our marriage. Like how you can afford those expensive gym memberships when you keep telling me we need to cut back on expenses." Lars finally found his voice. "Hey now, you don't need to air your dirty laundry in front of everyone." "You're absolutely right, Lars. Family business should stay private." I stood up, napkin dropping to the floor. "Which is why I'm sure everyone here will understand when I excuse myself from this delightful gathering." "Sit down," Nessa hissed. You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing myself?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich, coming from someone who just spent the last 10 minutes humiliating her husband in front of dinner guests. Maren's wine glass clinked softly as she set it down. "Perhaps," she said in her crisp, no-nonsense voice, "we should discuss what really embarrassing looks like." Every head turned toward her. Maren Hollis didn't speak unless she had something important to say, and when she did speak, people listened. "I received an interesting phone call last week," she continued, her gaze fixed on Nessa, "from First National Bank. Apparently, there was some confusion about an automatic payment that's been coming out of an account under my name for the past 6 years. Nessa went pale. "Grandma, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can. But let me save you the trouble." Maren reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "According to this statement, someone has been making payments of $847 every month toward a student loan debt. The payments have been coming from an account that I set up for emergency family expenses." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Now, here's the interesting part," Maren continued, unfolding the paper with deliberate precision. "The bank assumed I was making these payments myself, but when I called to inquire about the loan details, I discovered that the payments were actually being transferred from a different account first, an account belonging to one Kellan Brooks." My mouth went dry. I'd been making those loan payments for 6 years, ever since Nessa finished her degree. She'd promised to take them over once she got established in her career, but somehow that conversation never seemed to happen. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," Maren said, her voice growing colder with each word. "My granddaughter has been accepting $800 a month from her husband to pay off her student loans, while simultaneously telling her friends that she's the one supporting the family financially?" Samara looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Lars suddenly found his beer bottle fascinating. "It's not that simple," Nessa started, but Maren held up a hand. "Actually, it is that simple. It's quite simple indeed." She folded the paper and placed it back in her purse. "Kellan, how much have you paid toward these loans in total?" I did the math quickly in my head. "About $61,000, give or take." $61,000, Maren repeated, letting the number hang in the air like smoke. "And during this same period, Nessa, you've been spending your own income on what exactly?" "I contribute to the household expenses." "Do you?" "Because according to what you just told your friend here, Kellan's the one who needs financial help. So either you're lying to her, or you're lying to me. Which is it?" The rain had picked up again, drumming against the windows with renewed intensity. Avery sat quietly beside me, her small hand finding mine under the table. She didn't understand all the adult complexities at play, but she could sense the tension crackling through the room like electricity before a lightning strike. "I think," Maren said, rising from her chair with the dignity of a queen addressing her court, "that this conversation has been quite enlightening. Kellan, you seem like a decent man who's been taken advantage of by someone who should have been grateful for your generosity instead of mocking you behind your back." She turned to Nessa, and her voice could have frozen the ocean. "As for you, young lady, I suggest you take a long, hard look at what you're throwing away, because from where I sit, you're about to lose the best thing that ever happened to you." With that, she gathered her coat and purse. "Mrs. Heller," she addressed her elderly attorney, who had been sitting quietly through the entire exchange, "I believe it's time we discussed some changes to certain legal documents." The front door closed behind them with a finality that seemed to echo through the house. Lars mumbled something about needing to get home. Samara followed quickly behind, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Within minutes, the dining room had cleared, except for Nessa, Avery, and me. "Well," I said, looking at the ruins of our Thanksgiving dinner. "That was illuminating." "You planned this," Nessa accused, her voice shaking with rage. "You told her about the loans." "Actually, I didn't, but I'm starting to think I should have told her a lot of things." I started clearing plates, needing something to do with my hands. "Like how you've been staying late at the office 3 nights a week, or how you've suddenly developed such a passion for physical fitness. You're being paranoid." "Am I?" "Because paranoid would imply I'm imagining things. But those credit card statements don't lie, do they? All those charges at restaurants I've never been to. All those hotel purchases that you claimed were for work conferences." Avery tugged on my sleeve. "Dad, can I go to my room?" "Of course, sweetheart. Why don't you pick out a movie for later? We'll make some popcorn and have our own celebration." She hugged me tightly before disappearing upstairs, leaving Nessa and me alone with the wreckage of our marriage scattered across the dining room table like the bones of the turkey I'd carved with such care. "This isn't over," Nessa said, her voice low and dangerous. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and realized I was seeing a stranger. When had she become this person? When had I become someone she felt comfortable humiliating in front of family and friends? "You're right," I agreed. "It's not over. It's just beginning." The next morning brought the kind of clarity that only comes after a storm has passed. I woke up on the couch, my neck stiff from sleeping at an awkward angle, to find Nessa already gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and a note on the kitchen counter informed me she was spending the weekend at Samara's to think things through. Good. I needed time to think too. Avery wandered downstairs in her pajamas, hair sticking up in 12 different directions. "Is Mom still mad?" "Mom's working through some feelings," I said, which seemed like the diplomatic way to put it. "How about pancakes?" While Avery settled in front of the television with her breakfast, I found myself doing something I'd never done before in 15 years of marriage. I started looking through Nessa's things. Not out of suspicion, well, not entirely, but out of a growing need to understand who I'd been married to all this time. Her home office yielded the usual collection of marketing materials, client files, and promotional brochures. Nothing unusual there. Her dresser drawers contained clothes and accessories, though I noticed several items I'd never seen her wear. Expensive items that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. It was when I was gathering laundry that I found it. Hidden in the pocket of a jacket she'd thrown in the hamper was a phone I'd never seen before. Not her usual smartphone with the pink case that Avery had picked out, but a basic flip phone that looked like something from 10 years ago. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. The call history showed dozens of conversations with a contact listed simply as D. The text messages were even more revealing. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Kay is working late again. Hotel room is booked. Same place as last week. He has no idea. Sometimes I think he's too stupid to figure it out even if I told him directly." I sat down heavily on the edge of our bed. My bed, I corrected myself, and scrolled through months of messages. The timeline painted a picture I'd been too trusting, or maybe too stupid, to see before. The late nights at the office corresponded perfectly with text messages about hotel meetings. The work conferences matched up with romantic getaways. The personal training sessions were exactly what they sounded like, just not the kind that happened in a gym. But it was the most recent exchange that made my hands clench into fists. "Friday night is perfect. Kay will be at his computer like always. We can finalize the plan then." "Are you sure about this? It seems risky." "Trust me. After what happened at dinner, he's probably already looking for a lawyer. We need to move fast." "What about the kid?" "Avery will understand eventually. Kids are resilient." I stared at that last message until the words blurred together. They were planning something for Friday night, something that involved my daughter, something they thought I was too oblivious to notice. The sound of Avery's laughter from downstairs snapped me back to reality. I closed the phone and slipped it into my own pocket. Whatever game Nessa was playing, she'd just made a critical error. She'd underestimated her opponent. I spent the rest of the weekend being the father Avery deserved. We built a blanket fort in the living room, watched movies until midnight, and had breakfast for dinner because we could. But underneath the normalcy, my mind was working, planning, calculating. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Instead of heading to the office, I drove across town to a small building wedged between a coffee shop and a used bookstore. The sign on the door read, Hartley Investigations, discreet, professional, reliable. Jody Hartley turned out to be a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the kind of no-nonsense attitude that inspired confidence. She listened to my story without judgment, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "How long do you think this has been going on?" she asked when I finished. "Based on the text messages, at least 8 months, maybe longer. And you want to know who D is, where they meet, and what this plan is they're discussing? I want to know everything. But more than that, I want evidence. Real evidence that will hold up if this goes to court." Jody leaned back in her chair. Custody cases can get ugly, especially when infidelity is involved. Are you prepared for what we might find? I'm prepared for the truth, whatever that looks like. She quoted me a daily rate that made me wince, but I handed over my credit card anyway. Some things were worth the investment. "I'll need a few days to get started," she said. "In the meantime, I suggest you document everything. Keep a journal of her comings and goings. Save any evidence you find. And whatever you do, don't let on that you know anything." That last part turned out to be easier said than done. Nessa returned home Tuesday evening with an attitude that somehow managed to be both apologetic and defiant at the same time. She'd brought Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine, peace offerings that might have worked a week ago. "I've been thinking about what happened at dinner," she said as we sat across from each other at the kitchen table. "Maybe I was a little harsh?" "A little harsh." I repeated her words carefully, like I was tasting something bitter. "You know how I get when I'm stressed. Work has been crazy lately, and with the holidays coming up—" She trailed off, waiting for me to fill the silence with forgiveness. Instead, I asked, "How's Devin?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth, and for just a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped. "Who?" "Devin. Your personal trainer, the one you mentioned at dinner." "Oh." She set down her fork and reached for her wine glass. "He's fine, I guess. I haven't seen him in a while, actually. I've been thinking about canceling those sessions." "Really? That's too bad. You seem so enthusiastic about them." "Well, they're expensive, and like you said, we should probably cut back on unnecessary expenses." I nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about something. "What's that?" "How did you pay for them? The sessions, I mean, because I've been going through our joint account statements, and I don't see any charges to a gym or personal trainer." The color drained from her face. I used my credit card." "Your credit card that I pay off every month?" "Kellan, what is this? Some kind of interrogation?" "Just trying to understand our finances better. You know, since apparently I've been out of touch with how we spend our money." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the tile floor. "I don't like what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking direct questions and getting evasive answers. There's a difference. I'm going to bed. It's 7:30. I have a headache." She left me sitting alone with the remains of our dinner and the weight of everything I now knew. Upstairs, I could hear her moving around, probably texting D about this latest development. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and listening to my wife's breathing beside me. She'd fallen asleep quickly, the way people do when they're not carrying the burden of recent revelations. I envied her that peace, even as I despised the lies that made it possible. My phone buzzed with a text message. Jody checking in. "Preliminary research complete. Can you meet tomorrow at 2 p.m.? You're going to want to see this. I typed back a quick confirmation and deleted the message thread. Friday was still 3 days away, but I had the feeling that whatever Nessa and her mysterious D were planning, I was about to get several steps ahead of them. The game, as they say, was afoot. Jody's office felt different the second time around. Maybe it was the manila folder sitting on her desk, thick with photographs and documents, or maybe it was the grim expression on her face as she gestured for me to sit down. "Before we start," she said, "I want you to know that I've been doing this for 12 years. I've seen cheating spouses, embezzling business partners, insurance fraudsters, and every other kind of liar you can imagine. But this situation—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "This one bothers me." She opened the folder and spread several photographs across the desk. The first showed Nessa entering a hotel with a man I didn't recognize, tall, muscular, with the kind of artificially perfect smile that belonged in a toothpaste commercial. "Meet Devin Lake, age 41, owner of Elite Fitness Solutions. Divorced 3 years ago, one child he rarely sees, and a history of relationships with married clients." The next photo showed them leaving the same hotel 2 hours later. Nessa looked relaxed, happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. They've been meeting twice a week for the past 8 months, always at the Riverside Inn downtown. He pays for the rooms in cash, probably to avoid leaving a paper trail. I studied the photos, trying to reconcile this version of my wife with the woman who'd been complaining about our finances and my lack of ambition. "What else did you find?" "This is where it gets interesting." Jody pulled out a credit report. "Mr. Lake is in serious financial trouble. His gym is 3 months behind on rent, he owes back child support, and he's got creditors calling daily. But here's the thing, he's been making some unusual purchases lately." She showed me another document. Expensive surveillance equipment, a high-end camera with telephoto lenses, professional-grade recording devices, not exactly standard gym equipment. A chill ran down my spine. "He's been watching us. That would be my guess, and based on the text messages you showed me, I think he's been documenting your wife's lifestyle for leverage." "Blackmail?" "Possibly, or maybe he's planning to use the evidence in a different way." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Kellan, I think you need to consider the possibility that this isn't just an affair. I think your wife is being manipulated by someone who saw an opportunity and decided to exploit it." The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. What kind of opportunity? Think about it. Wealthy family, successful husband, comfortable lifestyle. Your wife has access to resources that someone like Devin Lake could only dream of. And if he's been recording their encounters, he's got leverage to make sure she keeps providing access. I thought about Maren's revelation at dinner, about the $61,000 I'd paid toward Nessa's loans, about the expensive clothes and accessories I'd found in her dresser. You think she's been giving him money? I think she's been giving him whatever he asks for. The question is, what's he planning to ask for next? Jody pulled out the last document in the folder, a property deed for a house I didn't recognize. This is where it gets really interesting. 3 weeks ago, someone put a down payment on a house across town, a house that costs $400,000. The buyer's name is listed as Nessa Brooks, but the financing application shows income figures that don't match her actual salary. My mouth went dry. She applied for a mortgage. She applied for a mortgage using falsified income statements, and based on the application, she's planning to move in with one Devin Lake, listed as her domestic partner. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The plan they'd been discussing wasn't just about continuing their affair, it was about starting a new life together. A life funded by my assets, my credit, and probably my alimony payments. "There's more," Jody said quietly. "I did some digging into Mr. Lake's background. This isn't his first rodeo. He pulled a similar scheme in Denver 5 years ago with a married woman named Patricia Hendricks. She ended up losing her house, her kids, and her retirement savings before she figured out what was happening. I stared at the photographs spread across the desk, trying to process the magnitude of what I was learning. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a systematic plan to destroy my life and rebuild it for someone else's benefit. What happened to Patricia Hendricks? She got smart, hired a good lawyer, documented everything, and fought back. Lake ended up with nothing and a restraining order, but it took her 3 years to rebuild her life. I gathered up the photographs and documents, my hands steadier than I felt. What do you recommend? Honestly? You need to move fast. If they're planning something for Friday night, you don't have much time to get ahead of this. What kind of timeline are we looking at? Based on the mortgage application, they're planning to close on the house next month, which means they need to establish grounds for divorce and property division before then. The implications hit me like a truck. They're going to claim I'm abusive, or financially controlling, or emotionally unavailable, or any number of things that would justify her taking half of everything and getting primary custody of Avery. My daughter's name in this context made my vision blur with rage. Whatever Nessa and Devin were planning, they were willing to use a 10-year-old child as a pawn in their scheme. I need to see this house, I said. I figured you might. I've got the address right here. The drive across town took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. The house turned out to be in one of those new developments where every building looked identical except for the color of the shutters. It was nice. Nicer than our current home, actually, with a 2-car garage and a small yard backing up to a man-made pond. I sat in my car across the street, staring at what was supposed to be my wife's new life, and felt something shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they were being joined by something colder, more calculating. Nessa had made a mistake. She'd assumed I was too trusting, too passive, too comfortable to fight back. She'd assumed I would roll over and let her take everything I'd worked for without putting up a fight. She was about to learn how wrong she'd been. My phone rang as I was driving home. Nessa's voice sounded strained when I answered. "Where are you? I came home for lunch and your car wasn't here." "I had some errands to run." "Why?" "No reason. We should probably talk tonight. About us, I mean." "That sounds like a good idea. Should I pick up dinner, or did you want to cook?" "Actually, I was thinking we could go out. Just the two of us. Avery could stay at my mom's." Friday night. They were moving up their timeline. "That sounds perfect," I said. "I'll make reservations somewhere nice." "Great, I'll see you at home." I hung up and immediately called Jody. "Change of plans. Whatever they're doing, it's happening tonight." "Are you ready for this?" I thought about Avery, about the house I'd just seen, about the months of lies and manipulation I'd been too blind to notice. "I'm ready." The afternoon crawled by with the slow inevitability of a funeral march. I picked Avery up from school and tried to act normal while my mind raced through possibilities and contingencies. She chattered about her day, her upcoming science project, and whether we could get pizza for dinner, blissfully unaware that her world was about to change forever. "Dad, you're being weird," she announced as we pulled into our driveway. "Weird how?" "You keep looking in the rearview mirror like someone's following us. And you've said, to everything I've told you, even when I said Mrs. Patterson assigned us to write a report about purple elephants." Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. "Sorry, sweetheart, work stuff on my mind." "What was that about purple elephants?" "See? You weren't listening." She unbuckled her seatbelt and gave me the kind of look that suggested I was failing some important parental test. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a slap. "What makes you ask that?" "Tommy's parents got divorced last year, and he said they acted just like you and Mom are acting. Lots of whispering and fake smiles and pretending everything's fine when it obviously isn't." I turned off the engine and twisted around to face her fully. "Avery, I want you to know that whatever happens between your mom and me, it has nothing to do with you. You're the best thing in both our lives, and that's never going to change. But you are getting divorced." "I don't know yet." Maybe. But if we do, it won't be because of anything you did or didn't do. Sometimes adults just grow apart. She nodded solemnly, processing this information with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. Can I still live with you? We'll figure that out together, okay? But right now, I need you to do something for me. What? Your mom wants you to stay at Grandma's tonight so we can have dinner together. While you're there, I want you to be extra good, and if anyone asks you questions about me or Mom, just tell them you don't want to talk about it. What kind of questions? Any questions. About how we get along, about money, about whether I've ever been mean to you or Mom. Can you do that for me? She reached over and squeezed my hand with her small fingers. I love you, Dad. I love you too, kiddo. More than you'll ever know. Nessa was already home when we walked through the front door, and the transformation was remarkable. Gone was the tense, defensive woman from the past few days. In her place stood the charming, attentive wife I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. There's my beautiful daughter, she said, wrapping Avery in a hug that seemed genuine. Are you excited about your sleepover at Grandma's? I guess. Dad said you guys are having a date night. That's right. We need some grown-up time to talk about boring adult stuff. While Nessa helped Avery pack an overnight bag, I retreated to my home office and made several phone calls. The first was to Jody, confirming our plan for the evening. The second was to my brother-in-law, Mike, a lawyer who specialized in family court cases. I need to ask you a hypothetical question, I said when he answered. This is about Nessa, isn't it? What makes you say that? Because you've never called me for legal advice before, and Linda mentioned that Thanksgiving dinner was a disaster. What's going on? I gave him the abbreviated version, focusing on the financial deception and the evidence I'd gathered about the affair. Jesus, Kellan. I'm sorry. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm looking for strategy. If she tries to claim I'm abusive or controlling, what's my best defense? Documentation. Witnesses. Evidence that contradicts her claims. Do you have any reason to think she might try something like that? I have reason to think she's planning to try exactly that, tonight. Mike was quiet for a long moment. Where are you meeting her? Chez Laurent, downtown. Public place. Good. Do you have a way to record the conversation? I'm working on it. Be careful, Kellan. If she's desperate enough to falsify mortgage documents, there's no telling what else she might be willing to do. After I hung up, I sat in my office chair and stared at the wall where Avery's artwork was displayed. Crayon drawings of our family, school photos, a Father's Day card that read, "World's Best Dad," in purple marker. Whatever happened tonight, I was going to make sure she didn't become collateral damage in her mother's scheme. The drive to Nessa's mother's house was tense with unspoken currents. Nessa kept up a stream of cheerful chatter, but I could see her hands trembling slightly as she applied lipstick in the passenger mirror. You look nice, I said as we pulled away from her mother's house. Thank you. So do you. I'd chosen my clothes carefully, a button-down shirt that would conceal the small recording device Jody had given me, dress pants with pockets deep enough to hold my phone with its voice memo app running. I made reservations for 7:30, I said. Perfect. That gives us plenty of time to talk. Chez Laurent was exactly the kind of restaurant Nessa loved. Dim lighting, expensive wine list, and the sort of pretentious menu where everything was described in French. We'd celebrated our anniversary here for the past 5 years, back when I still believed we had something worth celebrating. The hostess seated us at a corner table with enough privacy for an intimate conversation, but enough visibility that other diners could see us. Perfect for my purposes. You seem nervous, I observed as Nessa fidgeted with her napkin. Do I? I guess I'm just excited. It feels like we haven't really talked in months. That's true. We should probably start with the obvious question. Which is? I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice conversational. How long have you been planning to leave me? Her wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. I'm sorry, what? It's a simple question, Nessa. How long have you and Devin been planning this whole thing? The color drained from her face, but to her credit, she didn't try to deny it. I don't know what you think you know. I know about the hotel rooms. I know about the house you put a down payment on. I know about the falsified mortgage application. I kept my voice level, almost friendly. What I don't know is how you thought you were going to get away with it. She set down her wine glass with shaking hands. Kellan, please, let me explain. I'm listening. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. The thing with Devin, it started as friendship, and then it became something more, and before you knew it, you were planning to divorce me and take half of everything I've worked for. It's not about the money, isn't it? Because the mortgage application suggests otherwise. $400,000 is a lot of house for someone making your salary. She looked around the restaurant, probably hoping for some kind of escape route. How did you find out? Does it matter? The point is, I know. The question now is what we're going to do about it. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. I mean, you have two choices. You can come clean about everything. The affair, the financial deception, the plan to frame me as an abusive husband, and we can try to work out a reasonable divorce settlement. Or you can keep lying, and I can show this evidence to a judge who will be very interested in your mortgage fraud. Her eyes widened. You're recording this. I'm protecting myself, something I should have started doing months ago. Kellan, please, think about Avery. Do you really want to put her through a nasty custody battle? I am thinking about Avery. That's why I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing before this gets ugly. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the phone on the table like it was a venomous snake. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. What do you want? I want the truth, all of it, starting with how long this has been going on. She took a shaky breath. 8 months. It started 8 months ago. And the plan to leave me? That was Devin's idea. He said you'd never give me a fair settlement unless I had leverage. Leverage like claiming I was abusive. She nodded, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. I never wanted to hurt you, Kellan. I felt trapped. Like I was disappearing in this marriage, and Devin made me feel alive again. So alive that you were willing to destroy your daughter's relationship with her father. No, we weren't going to keep Avery from you. We just thought, if I had primary custody, you thought you could control the narrative, make me the villain so you could justify taking everything. She was crying openly now, drawing stares from other diners. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Kellan. I never meant for it to go this far. I felt a moment of sympathy for her. The woman I'd married, the mother of my child, reduced to tears in a restaurant because her carefully constructed lies had finally caught up with her. But then I thought about Avery, about the house across town, about the months of deception and manipulation. Sorry doesn't fix this, Nessa. Sorry doesn't undo the mortgage fraud or the money you've stolen or the lies you've told. What happens now? I picked up my phone and stopped the recording. Now we go home. You pack your things, and tomorrow morning, you call Devin and tell him the plan is off. And if I don't? Then I call the police and report the mortgage fraud. I call your employer and let them know about your extracurricular activities, and I call Maren and play her this recording. She flinched at the mention of her grandmother. You wouldn't. Try me. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 15 years of marriage settling around us like dust. Finally, Nessa reached for her purse. I need to make a phone call. No. Whatever you need to say to Devin can wait until tomorrow. Tonight we're going home, and you're going to tell me everything. Every lie, every deception, every detail of this plan. And then we're going to figure out how to clean up this mess without destroying our daughter in the process. She nodded, defeated. Okay. But as we walked to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was too easy. Nessa had never been the type to give up without a fight, and Devin Lake didn't strike me as someone who would walk away from $400,000 without trying to collect. The game was far from over. The house felt different when we returned from dinner, charged with the electricity of secrets finally exposed. Nessa moved through our living room like a stranger, touching familiar objects as if she were seeing them for the first time. "I need a drink," she said, heading for the kitchen. "I think you've had enough wine for one night." She turned to face me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the old Nessa, the defiant, sharp-tongued woman who never backed down from a fight. "Don't tell me what I can and can't do in my own house." "Your house?" Interesting choice of words, considering you were planning to abandon it for a new one across town. She poured herself 3 fingers of whiskey and downed half of it in one gulp. "You want to know the truth, Kellan? The whole truth?" "That's what I said. The truth is, I've been miserable for years. Years. Watching you sit in front of that computer every night, listening to you talk about server configurations and security protocols like they're the most fascinating things in the world. Do you know what it's like being married to someone who's more interested in his work than his wife? So you decided to have an affair. I decided to find someone who actually noticed I was alive." She took another sip of whiskey, her voice growing stronger. "Devin sees me, Kellan. Really sees me. When I'm with him, I'm not just the woman who does the laundry and pays the bills and pretends to be interested in your boring job." "And the mortgage fraud? Did Devin see that in you too?" Her confidence wavered slightly. "That was complicated." "Complicated how?" "He needed help. His business was failing, and he had creditors calling every day. He said if we could just get the house, we could start fresh, build something together. With my money. With money from the divorce settlement. Money I would have been entitled to anyway." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Entitled to? Based on what? 15 years of lying and cheating and spending money we didn't have? Based on being your wife. Based on raising your daughter and keeping your house and putting my own career on hold to support your ambitions. Your career that I paid for with $61,000 in student loans? She slammed her glass down on the counter. "I never asked you to do that." "You didn't have to ask. That's what married couples do, they support each other. Or at least, that's what I thought we were doing." "Well, maybe you thought wrong." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into our driveway. Through the front window, I could see headlights illuminating the rain that had started falling again. "Are you expecting someone?" I asked. Nessa's face went pale. "No." The headlights went out, and a moment later, someone knocked on our front door. Not the polite knock of a neighbor or the official knock of a delivery person, but the aggressive pounding of someone who didn't intend to be ignored. "Nessa!" A man's voice called from outside. "Open the door. We need to talk." Devin Lake. I'd seen him in photographs, but hearing his voice made him real in a way that was both satisfying and terrifying. "Don't answer it," Nessa whispered. "Why not?" "I've been looking forward to meeting him." I walked to the front door and opened it, coming face to face with the man who'd been sleeping with my wife for 8 months. He was bigger than he'd looked in the photographs, easily 6'3", with the kind of muscles that came from spending serious time in a gym. His hair was wet from the rain, and his eyes held the dangerous gleam of someone who was used to getting what he wanted. "You must be Kellan," he said, pushing past me into the house without invitation. "We need to have a conversation." "By all means, come in. Make yourself at home." He ignored my sarcasm and focused on Nessa, who was still standing in the kitchen doorway clutching her whiskey glass. "What the hell happened at dinner? You were supposed to get him to admit to hitting you." "He never hit me, Devin. You know that." "So, make something up. Say he threatened you. Say he's been controlling your finances. Say whatever you need to say to establish grounds." I cleared my throat. "I'm standing right here." Devin turned to me with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Right, the husband. I've heard a lot about you." "I'll bet you have. though probably not as much as I've heard about you. Such as? Such as your business being 3 months behind on rent. Such as the $15,000 you owe in back child support. Such as the mortgage fraud you convinced my wife to commit. His smile faltered slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. The house on Maple Street. $400,000. Ring any bells? Nessa stepped forward. Devin, he knows everything. He's been having me followed. You what? Devin's voice rose dangerously. I hired a private investigator. Very thorough woman. She found out some interesting things about your history with married women. You son of a… Careful, I interrupted. We're in my house, uninvited guest, and I have neighbors who pay attention to loud noises. Devin looked around the living room, taking in the comfortable furniture, the family photos, the obvious signs of financial stability. I could practically see him calculating what it would all be worth in a divorce settlement. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice dropping to a more reasonable volume. Nessa is going to file for divorce tomorrow morning. She's going to claim emotional abuse and financial control. She's going to ask for primary custody of the kid and half of everything you own. And why would she do that? Because if she doesn't, I'm going to release some very interesting photos and videos to her family, her employer, and her daughter's school. Blackmail, just like Jody had suspected. What kind of photos and videos? He pulled out his phone and scrolled through what looked like a substantial collection. The kind that would be very embarrassing if they became public. The kind that would destroy her reputation and probably cost her custody of her daughter. Nessa made a small sound of distress. You said those were just for us. Plans change, sweetheart. Sometimes you have to use the tools available to get what you want. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw not the scheming adulteress I'd been imagining, but a woman who'd been manipulated by someone far more calculating than she was. How much do you want? I asked. 200,000, cash, and Nessa files for divorce with the story we discussed. And if I refuse? Then everyone in this town gets to see exactly what kind of woman your wife really is, including your daughter. The mention of Avery sent a surge of rage through me so intense that my vision actually blurred for a moment. But I forced myself to remain calm, to think through the implications of what he was proposing. You know what's interesting about blackmail? I said conversationally. What's that? It's a felony. 5 to 10 years in state prison, depending on the amount involved. Good thing nobody's committing blackmail then. This is just a business negotiation between reasonable people. Is it? Because it sounds like extortion to me. I pulled out my phone. Maybe we should call the police and get their opinion. Devin stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. You really want to do this the hard way? The hard way? You mean the legal way? The way where criminals face consequences for their actions? I mean the way where your wife's reputation gets destroyed and your daughter finds out exactly what kind of woman raised her. I looked at Nessa, who was crying again, and made a decision that would have surprised the man I'd been a week ago. Go ahead, I said. What? Release the photos, send them to whoever you want, because here's what's going to happen next. I'm going to call the police and report you for blackmail, extortion, and criminal trespass. Then I'm going to call my lawyer and have you sued for everything you're worth, which admittedly isn't much. Then I'm going to call your ex-wife and let her know where you've been hiding your assets. Devin's confidence was cracking. You're bluffing. Am I? Because from where I stand, you're the one with everything to lose. Nessa might be embarrassed by those photos, but she'll recover. Her family loves her, her employer values her work, and Avery will understand someday that people make mistakes. But you'll be in prison, and your business will be bankrupt, and everyone in town will know exactly what kind of predator you are. The room fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Devin looked back and forth between Nessa and me, probably trying to figure out if I was serious. You have 10 seconds to get out of my house, I said quietly. After that, I'm calling 911. He stood there for a moment longer, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he wanted to spit at me. Then he turned and stalked toward the door. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is." The door slammed behind him, and I heard his car engine roar to life in the driveway. Nessa and I stood in our living room, listening to him drive away into the night. "He'll do it," she said quietly. "He'll release those photos. Probably. Aren't you worried about what people will think?" I looked at my wife, this woman I'd shared 15 years of my life with, and realized that somewhere in the past week, I'd stopped caring what people thought about her choices. "I'm worried about Avery," I said. "I'm worried about our future. I'm worried about cleaning up this mess you've made. But I'm not worried about gossip." "What happens now?" "Now you pack a bag and find somewhere else to stay tonight. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to get divorced without destroying each other completely." She nodded, tears still flowing. "I really am sorry, Kellan. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this." As she headed upstairs to pack, I walked to the window and watched the rain wash down the glass. Somewhere out there, Devin Lake was probably planning his next move, and I needed to be ready for whatever that might be. The game was far from over, but for the first time in months, I felt like I might actually have a chance to win. Friday morning brought the kind of crystalline clarity that only comes after a storm has passed. I woke up alone in my bed for the first time in 15 years, and instead of feeling lonely, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Nessa had left sometime after midnight, taking a suitcase and her wounded dignity to Samara's house. She'd also left behind her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, along with a note that read simply, "I'm sorry for everything. Too little, too late. But it was a start." I was drinking my first cup of coffee when Jody called. "How did last night go?" she asked. "Better than expected. Devin showed up at the house and tried to blackmail me." "Please tell me you recorded that conversation." "Every word, along with his threats to release compromising photos of Nessa." "Perfect. That gives us enough to file criminal charges if necessary. What's your next move?" "I pick up Avery in an hour and tell her that her mother and I are getting divorced. Then I call a lawyer and start the process of rebuilding my life." "Sounds like a plan, but Kellan? Yeah? Be careful. Men like Devin Lake don't give up easily. If he's desperate enough to try blackmail, there's no telling what else he might be willing to do." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and tried to figure out how to explain divorce to a 10-year-old. How do you tell a child that her mother has been lying for months? How do you preserve her relationship with someone who was willing to use her as a pawn in a scheme to steal everything you've worked for? The answer, I realized, was that you don't. You protect her from the ugly details and let her form her own opinions as she gets older. I was still wrestling with these thoughts when my phone rang again. This time it was Maren. "Kellan, dear, I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all, Mrs. Hollis. What can I do for you?" "Actually, I was calling to see what I could do for you. I heard through the family grapevine that Nessa spent the night at her friend's house, and I wanted to make sure you and Avery were all right." "We're managing. It's been a difficult few days." "I'm sure it has. Would you mind if I stopped by this afternoon? I have some things I'd like to discuss with you." "Of course. Avery and I should be home around 2. "Wonderful. I'll see you then." The drive to pick up Avery gave me time to rehearse what I was going to say, but when I saw her small face peering out the window of her grandmother's house, all my prepared speeches evaporated. "Dad!" She ran to the car and threw her arms around me before I'd even gotten out. "I missed you." "I missed you too, sweetheart." "Where's Mom?" "That's something we need to talk about. How about we go home and have some pancakes?" The conversation was every bit as difficult as I'd expected. Avery listened with the serious attention she gave to everything important, asking occasional questions but mostly just processing the information. So you and Mom aren't going to live together anymore? She asked when I finished explaining. That's right. But we're both still going to be your parents, and we're both still going to love you just as much as we always have. Will I still get to see Mom? Of course. We'll work out a schedule so you can spend time with both of us. What about Christmas? And my birthday? We'll figure all of that out together, okay? The important thing is that none of this is your fault, and both your mom and I want what's best for you. She was quiet for a long moment, stirring her pancakes around on her plate without eating them. Dad? Yeah? Are you sad? The question caught me off guard. A little bit. Divorce is always sad, even when it's the right thing to do. But I'm also relieved that we don't have to pretend everything's okay anymore. Me too, she said quietly. I was getting tired of pretending I didn't notice. Smart kid. Smarter than I'd given her credit for. We spent the rest of the morning working on her science project, a volcano that would erupt with baking soda and vinegar. It felt good to focus on something concrete and achievable, something with a predictable outcome. Maren arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the kind of expression that suggested serious business was about to be conducted. How are you holding up, dear? She asked, settling into my living room chair like a queen taking her throne. Better than I expected, honestly. And you, Miss Avery? How are you handling all this grown-up drama? Okay, I guess. Dad says Mom's going to live somewhere else for a while. That's right. Sometimes adults need space to figure out what they really want, but that doesn't change how much they love you. Avery nodded and excused herself to work on her volcano, leaving Maren and me alone. I've been doing some thinking since Thanksgiving, Maren said, opening her briefcase. About family, about loyalty, about what really matters in life. Mrs. Hollis, if this is about the inheritance, it's about more than that. It's about recognizing character when you see it. She pulled out a thick document. This is my will, Kellan. As of this morning, Nessa is no longer mentioned in it. I don't think that's necessary. Let me finish. As of this morning, Avery is the sole beneficiary of my estate, with you listed as the trustee until she turns 25. I stared at the document, trying to process what she was telling me. Mrs. Hollis, I can't accept this. You're not accepting anything. This is for Avery. But I wanted you to know because it affects some decisions you might need to make in the coming months. What kind of decisions? Legal decisions, custody decisions, financial decisions. She leaned forward, her blue eyes sharp as razors. Kellan, I've lived long enough to recognize a con artist when I see one. That man who's been manipulating my granddaughter is dangerous, and he's not going to give up easily. I know. I'm prepared for that. Are you? Because from what I've heard, he's already tried blackmail. What's his next move going to be? Before I could answer, the sound of breaking glass came from the kitchen. Avery screamed. I was on my feet and running before my conscious mind had processed what was happening. In the kitchen, I found Avery pressed against the far wall, staring at the back door where a brick had shattered the glass panel. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. I pulled her against me, checking for cuts or injuries while my mind raced through possibilities. There was a man, she whispered. He threw something at the door and then ran away. Maren appeared in the doorway, her phone already in her hand. I'm calling the police. Dad, I'm scared. I know, baby, but you're safe now. I promise. Through the broken door, I could see footprints in the mud leading away from the house. Big footprints. Size 12 or 13 boots. Devin Lake's footprints. The police arrived within minutes, led by Detective Nguyen, a woman in her 40s who'd been handling domestic cases for years. She took our statements, photographed the damage, and examined the brick, which had a note tied to it with rubber bands. What does it say? I asked. Detective Nguyen unfolded the paper and read it silently before handing it to me. The message was printed in block letters. Pay up or everyone sees the photos. This is harassment and vandalism, Detective Nguyen said. Do you have any idea who might have done this? I told her about Devin Lake, about the blackmail attempt, about everything that had happened over the past week. She took notes and asked follow-up questions, building a case that would hold up in court. We'll pick him up for questioning, she said. In the meantime, I'd recommend staying somewhere else tonight, just until we can get this sorted out. Actually, Maren interrupted, I have a better idea. Why don't you and Avery come stay with me for a few days? My house has excellent security, and I have plenty of room. Mrs. Hollis, I couldn't. Nonsense. It's the practical thing to do. She turned to Avery. Would you like to stay in a big house with a library and a game room? Avery looked up at me with hopeful eyes. Can we, Dad? If you're sure it's not too much trouble? It's no trouble at all. In fact, I insist. As we packed bags for an extended stay, I found myself thinking about the strange turns my life had taken in just 1 week. 7 days ago, I'd been a complacent husband who thought he understood his marriage. Now I was a single father preparing for a custody battle with a woman I barely recognized, and a man who was willing to terrorize a 10-year-old to get what he wanted. But I wasn't the same man I'd been a week ago either. That man would have paid the blackmail demand to avoid confrontation. That man would have accepted blame for the failure of his marriage and tried to make everyone happy. This man, the man I was becoming, had different priorities. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This is just the beginning. Pay up, or it gets worse. I showed the message to Detective Nguyen, who was still processing the scene. We'll trace this number, she said, but I have a feeling we already know who sent it. What happens next? Next, we build a case, and you and your daughter stay safe while we do it. As we loaded our bags into Maren's car, I caught sight of a familiar vehicle parked at the end of the street. A black pickup truck with tinted windows, just sitting there like a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. Dad? Avery tugged on my sleeve. Is that man going to hurt us? I looked down at my daughter, at her trusting face and worried eyes, and made a promise that I intended to keep no matter what it cost me. No, sweetheart. He's not going to hurt anyone. I won't let him. But as we drove away toward Maren's house, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Devin Lake had shown his hand, and now I had to show mine. The game was entering its final phase, and only one of us was going to walk away with everything intact. I intended to make sure it was me. The rain started falling again as we pulled into Maren's circular driveway, washing the world clean and preparing it for whatever came next. In the distance, thunder rumbled like a promise of storms to come. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the storm. I was ready to become one.